when it's actually occurring once school goes back. But it's 8 p.m., man. Teacher Talk Live. I have a really great guest tonight. I know I always say that, but I always mean it because I only really I try to bring folks on that will bring you the most value and that I think will have a great conversation. And like, I'm trying to learn stuff. I have no idea actually why I have to go to any professional development meetings at the beginning of the year now, because it just feel like I am living professional development 2 days every week. So here we go. Tonight, before I jump into this, I want to say that if you are watching this on YouTube or on YouNow, if you're new, you can go ahead and leave any question in the comment section below, or on YouNow, it happens there on the right-hand side, right where Kate's picture is over there. You can leave your comments there, and you can go ahead and email me anything that you're interested in or that you want to talk about. And other than that, real quick, I want to just say I really appreciate all the love this week when I put out this kind of weird new video for me, this lookbook. I did it in collaboration with Kyle Thane and Jess from Classroom Diva and Megan from Too Cool for Middle School, where we like did our fashion takes on fashion. I don't know where that was going, but we put this stuff out there this week and it was really fun. And I got like a ridiculous amount of positive comments back from that. So I really appreciate it. I literally, like, I never put out videos that I'm like particularly nervous about, but I hit upload on that thing and I went to bed and then I woke up the next day and I was like, God, I don't know what to think of this. Because really all I could think of was Colby Sharp making fun of me the whole time. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. So tonight's guest, I'm waiting for her to pop up here on the side, is she has Miss Tanner has Instagram account called Teach Miss Tanner. She teaches in Florida, but she's from Missouri. And we have, I followed her on Instagram for a while, and I'm really excited to have her on this evening to be able to talk about classroom management. Classroom management is what we're going to start out with, and then we'll kind of go from there. I know this is a big topic that I've been getting a lot of questions on so far this year because, you know, it's the beginning of the year, and you're like, people are sweating it, that your class is just going to turn terrible, and everyone's going to realize you never should have been a teacher at all, and your family's going to go, see, told you. You should have just, I don't know, kept that job at Hallmark. Nothing against Hallmark. Those people are wonderful. All right, so I'm guesting her in now. And then this is going to work tonight easily. We'll just jump right into it. Waiting. It's super hot in New Jersey today. I'm just going to say that while this is on. We went out antique shopping today. Miss Tanner.
Hello, how you doing?
How are you?
I'm doing
all right.
Yes, I hear you.
All right. Thanks for doing this evening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Especially since you're back in the classroom already, which you know, we don't go back till next month, so it's wild. It's one of my favorite things about YouTube and Instagram is seeing how different everyone else's schedules are and how different their schools can be and their relationship with their coworkers. All that stuff is it's really interesting. So real quick before we get into this, would you mind like introducing yourself, say like who you are, where you teach, that sort of thing?
Okay, sure. My name is Darien Tanner. I live in Orlando, Florida, but I teach high school in a city called Kissimmee, Florida. I'm originally from East St. Louis, Illinois. And I spent 11 years in Michigan. I actually taught 2 years middle school in Michigan, and then I moved here around 6 years ago. And so now I'm on my 7th year going into my teaching high school here in Florida. So that's kind of a little bit about me in regards to my teaching career.
That's a really big change, all the way from Michigan down to Florida. I don't know. I don't know that I like the weather in either one of those locations too much. But I live in New Jersey. We don't have we have like 5 perfect days a year, and that's about it. Then it's either just too cold or too hot.
Yeah.
So as we're getting into this, I want to ask, as you're beginning the school year, you've been back for, you said this is your 2nd week now. How have you laid the groundwork for classroom management? How do you set the tone? What does that look in the beginning of the year for you to like set your expectations out to so the students know, what they're going to get when they walk into your classroom? Can you walk us through a little bit?
Um, well, I'm a pretty structured person. I teach high school, so it's like elementary and middle school. It's more about relationship building. And as I told you yesterday, respect doesn't come automatically anymore. And so when I was in school, as soon as you saw a teacher, it was automatic respect. This is an adult. But now that's not the case. And so I kind of have to be a little bit strict those beginning days. And so the funny thing is, the first 2 days of school, I do not go over rules. I don't go over policies. What we do is something, we do critical theories. And so I introduce myself, I tell a little bit about who I am, but I don't mention cell phones. I don't talk about classroom seating or anything. We just build relationships those first 2 days. And then next week, it's almost like it's fluid. I mean, it happens automatically because they spent time with me. We worked critically. We did some team building. The trust automatically. Now I can bring in the rules and the policies because now they kind of know who I am just a little bit, just off those 2 days. So that's kind of what I work around. I do a lot of discussion and talking with my students because, again, they're in high school and they're able to understand certain things. So I'm strict in teaching about respect, but as far as the methods and things that I use, I kind of go from a relationship-based standpoint, and then I go into the structure and all of that. So that's kind of my little trick. I never mention rules or anything at the very beginning. I kind of open up. We can talk about, we have discussion, we have relationship, about relationship, and then I kind of delve in on the rules and the policies from that standpoint.
Was it always like that in your classroom, or did you start so when you first started teaching your first few years, was it exactly the same as that, or did you change at some point?
It's always been that way because believe it or not, Michigan State University. Okay. And Michigan State kind of, it was sort of taught. They kind of talked about having a relationship with students. And I also, my teacher mentor, when I had to do my year internship in Michigan, she was the same way. So I do early on. And so it was nothing that I really learned per se. I didn't go right into the classroom my first year with the structure-based rules, policies. Nothing's wrong with that. But having seen my mentor do it and kind of be taught that way in Michigan State, it was something that I did my first year teaching.
Yeah. It's so how do you I'm trying to get a sense, because I hear what you're saying is very, very consistent with who I am, which so I'm not I feel like I would be like largely reiterating what you're saying if I had any of these so far. So, but I have one more question for you in terms of how do you build relationships? Like, what does that look like inside the classroom or outside of the classroom, or what's your favorite way to make that happen with students?
Honesty is the big. I am in the school system, but I explain to the students sort of the truth behind certain things. I explain to them that I understand that they may not need the content. I explain that the certain things that they have issues with in school may be true, but I also explain to them the significance of having education and figuring a way around that. And so I think being authentic about what I teach and why they're there is one of the things that open up the key. So we understand, okay, I teach English, I teach reading and writing. So there's not a lot of my students that hate reading, they hate writing. It's not their favorite subject. But if I come to them with an authentic voice and I'm explaining to them, yes, you may not need to know Shakespeare life, but I explain to them the significance of it and explain that I'm trying to help them. But again, my teaching is content. It's all also about life skills and different things. And so when you blend in things that matter to them with the content, you kind of have a leeway to that, to the actual trust issue. So we talk about life, we talk about relationships every once in a while. So you blend that in with Shakespeare, with other things, and you kind of gain their trust that way. But I think it's about being authentic from the beginning and explaining to them that I'm not some robot or some dictator trying to, ruin their lives because we're at school. But they understand from that standpoint, we have to do school, but I also understand from your perspective that you may not like certain, but we have to do. We have to do realistic about really while they're in school.
Yeah,
So especially high school.
that's a great answer. One of my things that I get a lot is, so I teach ninth grade literature
Hmm.
at all boys school. So back to school night, every year I get moms that wait in a long line just to come up and tell me that their son hates reading and that I'm going to have problem this year getting him
Hmm.
to do the work. Which my answer is always like, oh, that's great. Like I kind of love when kids don't like reading because now I get to be the best teacher that you ever had, and I make it all about me instead. And it kind of like takes that moment up a little bit. But in reality, like if you never liked reading, and now class, I'm going to try to everything I can to get a book in front of you or to make my class the class that you are excited about coming to. And if you're excited about coming to it, then you have to be doing the work. Like there's no
Hmm.
chance you're not going to read that day. And
Hmm.
that's all I'm ever trying to get them to do. And I agree in terms of content, you know, one of my, I talked about this, I think I talked about this last week or the week before, but it bears repeating. But when I read Shakespeare, I compare Shakespeare to 100 different things that the kids would actually know about, right? So
Hmm.
whether it's a TV show that they're watching or it's a song that they like. So last year there was a J. Cole song that came out that all of my students kept listening to. I heard it over and over and over again in the hallway. So I printed out all of the lyrics to the song and I gave it out to them and I said, I want you to circle all the words that my grandmother would have no idea what they meant. They did. So
Hmm.
like every word that was slang, they would circle it, and then I'd say, now you have to put like a word that my grandmother would know in there, or your grandmother, it doesn't matter,
Hmm.
and they would, and that kind of blows their mind. I say, like, in 500 years, no one's going to know what they're talking about. No one is going to ever have a clue what Snoop was talking about in any song ever because they're not real words. He just
Hmm.
made things up. And
Hmm.
but it's fun, right? And so that's the idea behind that in
Hmm.
Shakespeare is that we're just trying to have fun with what we're saying. But 500 years, I mean, jokes I used 2 years ago in school or goofy things that I did or songs that I used, no one listens to those anymore. You have to keep changing it. And I think teaching kids through that lens of like, here's something now I'm going to
Hmm.
connect it to whatever I need you to know is all world. It's like, that's how to do it. And uh, in terms of relationships, I think it shows like, this is how much I care. I don't listen to
Yeah.
a lot of the music that I use in class, but I'm willing to listen to it. I'm willing to watch those movies and those TV shows just so
Hmm.
that you know that I don't just want to be down. I want to be like I want you to know this is how I'm willing to go to
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
Uh, so there's our first question of the night is you just picked the one with the name that I
I
was
think the first
never going
question.
to get. I apologize in advance to this viewer. Pranav Chaudhary said, I bet you got that right too. That's one of my guesses. So the question is, what kinds of behavior incentives are good to use for middle or high school students? Do you use any sort of incentives in your classroom, students to act or behave?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question?
Sure. So, like, what sort of incentives do you find work behavior incentives for high school students? Are there any incentives that you use to kind of like keep kids in line or to like promote good behavior in your classroom?
Um, I tried the reward system. It was extrinsic. I tried it and it didn't work. So it was a system. It would have they could win a free, get a free pass to not do a journal. There were homework passes. We did a pizza party before, and what I found out, and again, this is just me. This is how it worked with me. I found out it didn't last, and so eventually, the pizza wasn't, a big deal anymore. All right, I'll just do the journal. It's not a big deal, and then I stopped it. And so I started to make things more intrinsic. I started to make so my students like to debate. So I started like 10 things, activities in the classroom as incentives versus just physical things. So if they like to debate, I'll say, okay, guys, if we do this, we do that, we can have the debate on Friday. And so it was more content, there was more academic type of rewards they received outside of the more candy and the pizza. It just didn't last long. Again, for each teacher, I mean, you can do whatever you choose to do. But for me, with the high school students, they were on board for maybe 2 months, and then eventually it kind of wore off a little bit. They're tired of the physical things, and I just started kind of incorporating the activities and the debate, do certain books they wanted to read, so kind of incorporating with just the classroom culture. So I don't really do the reward system only because it hasn't worked for me, and I've seen it work for other teachers, but as for me, I kind of steered away from it because it didn't last very long in the classroom. So
I think that's a really good point that you bring up, though, is that if it's not working, just stop doing it. Like trying to force something on students is it's not authentic for you, and it doesn't help them. Like I have done any number of these things, and usually my incentives just pop up nowhere. So if I notice someone's doing a really great job, I might make a big deal and say, here's a homework pass or 2 or 3, depending on how great you've been doing. Because I've been noticing you're prepared every day, you're doing your best in class. I saw you like step out of like your comfort zone and help someone else. Like I think those things need to be called out, but largely I think in terms of incentives for me, it's just a quiet word on the side and pulling a student aside and saying, hey, I gotta talk to you real quick. I can't even tell you how happy it makes me that you are the human being that you are, that I think you are like what I want the other students to become, or hey, I really noticed that thing you did the other day, and that was really nice. Or I heard from another teacher. I think just those quiet words with like hand on the shoulder, pat on the back, letting kids know is a lot of times, I mean, is maybe something they're not getting anywhere else, especially if they are like the fly below the radar kids, right? They're not the super good ones, they're not the super low ones that demand a lot of attention, but they're just like that guy that coasts or that girl that I say guys all the time, boys, so it's my fault. So like, but I think those things really work, and I also think it works when someone's not behaving. Pull someone aside and say, hey, just so you know, I'm noticing what you're doing and I don't really like it. I'm actually very disappointed in the kind of behavior that I'm seeing, because I know you can do better than that, or I know you're actually fantastic and you're not even letting yourself like live up to your true potential. That stuff goes really long, because it's just you and I locking eyes and I'm communicating something to you, instead of like, well, it's not like in the middle of class, it's not tons of madness going on. And the other real quick thing I think is I keep Post-it notes on my desk all the time so I can write quick notes to students, like keep your head up. Or I used to have these pictures with Tupac on them, and I used to just like keep your head up, and I would put it on kids' desks, and everyone. Then I realized that no one knew who Tupac was, and that was just a total waste of my time. But their moms always, so I would, if you can write little notes to kids and say, hey, I just want you to know you're doing an awesome job today, or like nice work with that answer that you put out there, or job being in your group, that those little things go really long way. And I don't have to buy candy and rock kids' teeth with it. So I mean, that's the thing for me.
I 2 years ago, 2 years ago, I had a class. I don't know if this was done on purpose, but there were like 24 students and maybe 3 girls. And it was a low level reading class. And so it was challenging at the beginning, but here's what I did. Maybe after 3 or 4 months of teaching them, I got to know them. I made like little confessions or affirmations for each student. And what I did was I brought them in front of the class, and I kind of told, and I said the face, like everybody could hear these positive words. It changed everything. And I used to think when you work with high school students, you think this stuff is kind of corny, like, but they love it. And so it's missing. It's missing in the home, and it's just missing those positive words. And so I understand that was a good answer, because I did that, and it changed the dynamic of the classroom and our relationships. And so it was awesome. Just those few little words that I spoke to them, and they knew it was I was authentic, and it changed everything. So their work ethic, everything changed after that day.
Yeah.
So
and you know what? Because I think now they're hungry for it, right? It's almost like if I'm trying to think of like, I don't really have a good metaphor for this. I was going to use a metaphor, but I think this idea of like, if they know they can get that stuff from you in class, they know that you're going to be the teacher that is going to fill them up with that goodness. Now I want to do that in class because I want that. I really like when she does that, when she says those things to me. I tell guys all the time, I'll put myself on blast and say, look, I realize this is super corny, but it is how it is, and I don't know a better. I haven't been cool since 1995, so I'm not even sure I was cool then. But our next question comes from the Mrs. CJ, which is an interesting name since that's my first name. What kind of procedures or strategies do you use for whole class discussion? How do you ensure high levels of participation? How do you get kids to talk in your class and actually participate when you're having debates?
That's interesting. Again, we start with a lot of students being shy. You still get a core group of students that talk. And once they see the students, and this is what's happening now, because we start right, and I say we because I have a co-teacher in my classroom as well. We started right off with critical thinking, argumentative skills and debate skills because we're working on argumentative writing at this point. And so we have a set of students. 65% of the students start off very shy. Nobody's saying anything, and then you have the 35% that are. So we would have them, they would watch them, they would get comfortable. Because here's the thing, students to me students lead students. And so yes, the teachers are there to guide and to lead students to drive the class. So that 35% students that are very engaged, that are participating, those 65 that are not talking, they're going to sit back and watch. They watch everything to the students when they watch what we say. And so eventually, as we keep, and we don't put pressure on them, but we don't let them, we don't let them off the slide. And so, and again, this may not be the book method, but I'm pretty tough on them. Like, you guys got to, and I want them to understand, because even when we talk to parents, it's like, well, they don't have to be verbal. That's not a curriculum thing. My kid doesn't have to talk. They shy, they don't talk. But we figure out ways to help them understand the significance of discussion and talk. Once they see the 35%, enjoying it, having fun, and they see our reaction to the kids responding, then slowly, and this is exactly what's happening right now, happened today, slowly but surely, 2 of my shyest kids, their parents told us at the open house, listen, is this the right class for my son? Because he doesn't talk. This is just an issue we have. Spoke out of the blue. No, we didn't have to ask them. They raised their, and this is a huge thing for them, but they sat and they watched. They sat and they watched us do it. They saw how we responded and how everybody was nice. We present a particular culture. And this is another thing. Class is about discussion and you talk a lot. You have to set a certain environment. And this is what we do at the very beginning. We have students understand we don't talk about each other. We don't talk about answers. We don't talk about the way people look. If somebody stumble over words like I am now. If somebody said them, I actually had a student last year that had a huge stuttering issue, and he spoke all the time because we created a climate that that allowed you to be who you were, to be able to talk. And so I think that's one of the biggest things, is creating the climate the kids feel comfortable, but just start amount of students that will speak, and then eventually the kids, because they're watching. It happens every single time. They're watching and they're enjoying it, and they're seeing the other kids are enjoying it. And so we really don't have a problem as it progresses. And so at the very end, every last student that I had, only 2 last year didn't actually do it, but all the quiet, all the shy ones year, they did and everything. They just had to watch and had to know and confident in what they were doing. And so it's hard at the beginning, but we just work with them, kind of put a little pressure on them. Now I also have it as a grade. And so I know that's not, a lot of teachers may disagree with that, like you can make a verbal, discussion a grade, but we do that. And the students really speak. And so again, that's not popular to give a kid a grade based off, because we have verbal vocabulary quizzes. I don't do multiple choice quizzes. We have a discussion. And I learned this from French class in Michigan State. We have a discussion board and for our vocabulary, and it's a grade. If you don't speak, you don't pass. and it's worked for us. Again, like I said, some teachers are like, I don't, and I've had my debates and I've spoken with parents, but it has worked for us. And the students at the end ended up doing the vocabulary quiz and really understanding. So it's just a little bit of pressure and just some classroom climate and them seeing the others to just work with the ones that are eventually there.
That's super interesting. I love, you know, that idea of like building some climate, especially if kids feel safe, they're gonna talk. And I give grades for participation as well, and that is all like if you, I don't, no one will ever get 100 in participation if they refuse to talk. So I'll sometimes get these really smart kids that just want to sit quietly and never say anything in class, and I have to push them. And the reason I have to push them is because you're 14 years old. I need you to get used to owning an opinion and sharing that opinion. You matter. What you think matters. And so I want you to get used to like voicing that opinion and then standing up for it. Like if no one else agrees with you, you need to be ready to do that, because I feel like teenagers are, I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't want to make a blanket statement that like everyone's exactly the same way, but I feel like, I remember when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, most people, any adult that talked to me, it was always something along the lines of like, so how's school, or how's baseball, or how's the play coming along, whatever it is. It was real basic kind of like surface talk. But when an adult ever asked me a question that went deeper or said, well, why is school like that? Or why do you feel that way? That just meant the world to me. Like to have someone that like, wait a minute, do you care? Like you actually want to hear me talk about this? That was such a big deal. And I want to give that back to my students. And I just remember that kind of in retrospect, I realized that it helped me figure out who I was. Like to go, well, why do I think and feel the things I do? Like, is it just because my parents told me to, or because I saw it on TV, or because, I don't know, like Kendrick Lamar is telling me that that's my viewpoint on that. Like, and instead taking a step back and trying to figure out how to do that. One of the other things that you said I thought was interesting is students learning from students. And so my one bit of advice I would give to this question is I, as many times as I can, have students lead the discussion instead of me. And then I'll sit near kids that are quiet and I'll just have a quiet conversation with them. And if they don't want to answer, I might say like, hey, you know what? Mr. Brown over here asked me, he just made this really good point. And he, I'm going to share it for him just because I think it was such a great idea. And I think that helps kids to feel safe also, because it's one of their peers that's up there leading the conversation. And I'm given the opportunity to like sit with someone who's not feeling so comfortable and help them get there. So yeah, that's just one of my like tricks that I do that the kids don't even realize. They think I'm just trying to chill while they like, so they can do work for me, but it's like all part of my master plan all the time.
Right.
Learning About Life asked, how do you get over procedures in high school, or how do you go over procedures in the high school setting? I feel young grades have them practice again and again, but I can't seem to get my students doing that. Any advice? So how do you get your kids to do, like, how do you get them to own those procedures and do them every single time? Do you have a tactic for that?
I don't, because the conversation, the discussion does it. Our machine at the school is down. And so we've been in school for 2 weeks. I have no syllabus. I still don't. And so why am I mentioning that? Because that's the procedure based. So what I decided to do was just sit and again, discuss and talk with the kids. I don't have a cell phone policy. I just asked you, hey, I don't want to see the cell phones, put the cell phones away. I don't see them. So again, I've seen certain teachers that have, I don't know what you call the little things where you put them away. And again, that's good, to each his own, but I haven't had that. Like, I'm not a procedure type person because it just works. The conversation, the discussion I have with the students just work. I don't have a cell phone issue because they just respect me enough to say, okay, put the cell phones away when Miss Tanner's room. But it's all because of those 2 days of team building and just a little bit of strictness. All teachers are different. All methods being real, just being honest. I don't have like a procedure for cell phones. I don't even do seating arrangements. Like I don't have a seating chart. So we change all the time, the classroom seating. So I don't have like those procedure type things because, I say no cell phones. I don't see them. No profanity in the classroom. A couple of them may slip, but I'm sorry. And it's just the respect that I'm able to gain off those 2 days, and just throughout the week, just being honest and open with the students. They just trust. And again, they're high school, and I explain to them, guys, you're 16 years old. If I'm asking you to put I talk to them just like I talk to an adult. All I'm doing is asking you to put the cell phone away for 49 minutes. I don't have to have a choice, to explain that to you. And they get it. And that's what people don't understand about high school students and middle school students. If you have a relationship, again, you still have your ones that want to challenge you. I'm not saying that all my kids are perfect and they listen to me every single time, but I just don't have procedures in place to add to, because within the team building and the relationship building, simply say, put the cell phones away. Oh, sorry, Miss Tanner, and it's just so I haven't had to do that. I haven't had to do that. The procedures, any of them really. The discussion based, nothing. I haven't had to do anything. They just sort of kind of listen. But again, I've been in my school years. What happens is word travels throughout the school. So once you build a reputation for yourself, kids automatically come in knowing. And that's the funny thing, because at the beginning of the year, they're trying to figure out, okay, who do you have? What type of teacher is she? Oh, she's strict. Oh, she's nice. And they figure that out before they even walk in the classroom. And so that's another thing too. When you build a reputation, then it's automatic. The kids just and they watch other kids do it. And so if somebody pulls out a cell phone and I call them out, then it sets a tone for the rest of the class not to pull out the cell phone. I have different approaches. I have different approaches to certain things. And so it may not be, by the textbook and what a lot of people agree with to a certain, in a certain extent, but I really don't have, I don't have like a set procedure I use for certain things, because just the simple has worked for me in the past and now. So
But I think what I'm kind of like, I don't know another word for it either, but like the kind of vibe that I'm picking up is that you seem like a very consistent person and you don't seem afraid, right? And I think that those are really a big deal. I remember my first year, I think a lot of the things I did with my first year were because I was like, there were kids that I let intimidate me. Like I would get like some kind of death stare from someone. I'd go, oh, I don't really know what's going to happen there. And now I just I'm not afraid of anyone. And I tell the kids that I want this to be the best class of the day. You can't be on your cell phone if this is going to be the best class of the day, right? Because you're going to be distracted and your head is somewhere else. I'm going to be completely selfish because I know what's right. I'd be so selfish that I want all of your attention on me for the next hour or whatever, the 50 minutes are our periods. And just kind of like that humor mixed in like the consistency and like the no fear really helps me. I very rarely to deal with like things like cell phones, and if I do, the content are so ridiculous that no one ever wants to do it. So if I take your cell phone, I'll do a couple of different things, right? I will wrap it in paper towels, and then I wrap it in tape like 100 times, and then at the end of the day, I give it back to you. And no one's ever gotten mad at me. They're always like, "Are you serious? Like, check my text messages. I need to tell that stuff." I'm like, yeah, man, it's like evil Christmas. Or I'll tell them that I'll hide it in my bookcases. I have all these bookcases on my wall, and you have 1 minute to find your phone at the end of the day. And if you can't find it, then I'm gonna, there's gonna be some kind of repercussion after that. And that kind of like ridiculousness really, it helps me a lot. Plus not being afraid of students. I have very few issues as well, but I think that reputation piece part as well. When you can get students that in the beginning of the year, I make myself as public as possible. I want to be out in the hallway before school, after school, in between classes. And when my freshmen see me talking to all the guys on the football team that they look up to, or the guys on the wrestling team that they look up to, or someone that's cool because they're like in hip hop outside of school and they know who they are, and they like me, that just shines a positive light on me. And those guys will often say, like, this is Reynolds, this is my guy, don't mess around in his class. And that really works. And for me, like, it can seem so petty because, like, because I'm trying to, like, gain importance from students based on, like, who I hang out with or who will stick up for me. But I'll take anything I can get. I'm not above almost anything as long as, like, you know, you see, yeah, that guy had a great experience in my class. You should have a great experience in my class too. Now, like, let's get to it and make this awesome. So
exactly.
Yeah. Which question? Queen Della Classroom is asking, are there any tips for substitutes regarding classroom management? Did you ever substitute?
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry. Were you ever a substitute teacher?
Yes, I was a substitute teacher before I got my certification. And
how did you deal with your management for that?
And I didn't have very many assignments. I didn't last too long with it because I eventually got into the College of Education, the program itself. I didn't have the younger ones because I did it for so I had the younger kids, and so I really didn't have any classroom management. I think though for substitute teachers, it's I know it's challenging again because you're coming into a classroom, you don't know the teachers. So what I would do, and this is what some of my favorite substitute teachers did when I was in school, and they were very memorable. You kind of talked about like life with the students. You kind of again mixed in. You didn't come right in with what the teacher gave you. I mean, not saying you don't do that, but if the teacher has a movie, typically what the teachers had for me were movies. You know, like throwing them. Unfortunately, it was like just throw in a movie or what have you, just to keep the kids quiet. So, my favorite substitute teachers, they would just come and talk about what happened, something current event, and they kind of end up with kind of again relationship. So you may only see them one time, but it's kind of difficult when you don't have if the teacher doesn't have a set plan. Now, if the teacher has a set plan, then you can probably be okay with just doing the plan classroom management if you can figure out to about the kids or kind of talk to them about different things and not the content. With whatever time you have, you can kind of open up there. But unfortunately, substitute teaching is a challenge when it comes to classroom management, especially if you have the core teacher that has problems. So if the core teacher have problems with management, then the teachers is falling behind, you know. But I'm not saying, here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that if you have kids that behave, you know, poorly with the sub, that you're a bad teacher. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if they're kind of set, if they don't respect their core teacher, then it's just going to be an issue coming in. So that's a tough one. Substitute teaching is, I mean, you're going into a school, you don't know what the administration is like, you don't know what the discipline, you don't know what the teacher is like. And so you're in front of kids that you've never seen and you may never see after this period. So what they did, what my favorite substitute teachers did was just that. They would talk about, you know, different things, things that we wouldn't necessarily talk about in the classroom because of content. They just kind of used it for the opportunity to get to know the kids and just talk about themselves and have the kids talk about who they were. So,
yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think, first of all, I would say I always hear from folks that say things like, thinking about becoming a teacher, so I decided to substitute first. And I think that's the worst idea that you can do. You'll just make you not like teaching because it's not your class and you don't know those students. And like you said, you very well may never see those students again. So there's not a real incentive for them to respect you. So I think, one, just don't take it so seriously. Like it's all right. If something goes awry, as long as no one like catches on fire, you're going to be all right. You're essentially, the school knows that. I think they know you're essentially babysitting the students for the day. But like, I agree with what you said as well in terms of take ownership of it. Try something. Like come up with a couple of like, instead of watching a movie, like if you know that's a movie that's a total throwaway, because sometimes it might be lesson based, right? If you're reading the Odyssey and they have you watch something like Troy, there are a couple of things you can pull out of that. But if it's a total throw moment and you know the kids are watching Iron Man or something, then maybe have a conversation about that movie or even set it up that way. Like, and then be a presence in the class. Like, don't just sit at the teacher's desk and or hide in the corner. Like I would go and sit near kids and talk to them and interact with students. And that is just going to make it more fun for you too, because right, that's what you're there for is to build these relationships with students, start practicing as a substitute as well. I think. Indie Kitty One asked, "Do you have books that you can't let kids read? Is there anything that's off limits in your classroom in terms of like books that students want to read, or do you have any rules of that?"
Off limits as in.
I guess your personal beliefs or choices, or like, is there anything? So for myself, I know I get money every year. It's like the only thing I get money for at school is I can order independent reading books for my students. So I can order anything the students want to read, and I often tell my students that there are no parameters. Now I say that knowing that like every once in a while I'll get some crazy book that I'm like, bro, like I'm not ordering this for you because it's like so because a couple of years ago when Straight Outta Compton the movie came out, I had a student never ever read, but who wanted I want to say it was Ice Cube's autobiography after that or something like that. So I order it for him, and he reads that, and then he wants to read Dr. Dre's autobiography. I order that for him because this kid has never ever read a book. He had a very low reading level, and it was, for me, you could read almost anything you want, and if you're reading for a sustained period of time every day, because he also had really bad ADHD and was not medicated or anything, but if he could sit down and still read for 20 minutes, I felt like we won the day. Like you can get whatever you want, but that some of the books eventually we kind of like went through everything that was known, and they started trailing off into this like world of like books that it wasn't anything that I felt like was healthy, and I just made the personal choice and said like, no, like if you want to read that, I'm not gonna let you know. Like talk to your mom about it. But in my class, I can't have like at some point my kid's got to eat. So if the principal comes in and sees you read something that I'm gonna get in trouble for, like, kids are gonna starve, and then I look like a bad dad, and I don't get a Father's Day gift. So it's really about me. At the end of the day. Yeah. But do you have anything that you don't allow the students to read, or do you deal with that kind of thing yourself?
I'm sorry. You said what? I apologize. I can't.
That's fine. Yeah, it's breaking up a little bit, but do you have any books that you don't let kids read, or like how are you selective so that kids have books that you want them to read?
Well, I teach English, and so we also have intensive reading teachers, which most of my students have, and so believe it or not, the English teachers were just allowed to really have like independent reading in class. Mostly that was dependent upon the reading teacher. With the lit circles and things like that. But this is the first year that because we really focused on writing. So I really never had the issue of students outside of what we had to read for the district, of course. I never did a lit circle or independent reading in that sense of you choosing your own book and rereading in class. That was something that our intensive reading teachers did. And so I don't know about restrictions. I mean, that's an interesting question because, I mean, students are allowed to read, I guess, what they want in the sense of their parents and things like that. Now, this is a very sketchy question for me. And if I'm allowed to say this, and this is just going to be real, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian teacher. And so in my mind, I want to, be careful of what I expose to, you understand? And so even though I have to figure out a way to, and this has been a challenge for me, I have to figure out a way to kind of not separate Christianity, because I don't do that. I'm a teacher, but I would say that I really necessarily want to open up religious books, if you understand what I mean by that, only because we have different religions. But if a parent is allowing their kid to read, it's just it's a complicated thing for me. I've never really had to address or kind of deal with an issue of should kids be allowed to do this or that, or read this type of book or that type of book. Now, reading level, I saw somebody asking about would they allow I allow to read below their reading level for like just interest. And I don't necessarily see a problem with that if it's just independent reading and so forth. But of course, you want to challenge them with reading level and beyond. But that's an interesting question for me because I'm just going to be honest with you. I have to watch the content that I expose my students to because, yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting, and especially with so many things going on, there's so many changes in the school system. It's just an interesting question because the kids can read what they want if they're parents, but as a teacher, I still want to watch what I allow them to read, if you understand what I mean by that. And so I don't know, that's a very interesting question.
So I would say to that, one, you talk about anything you want, and I realize that some topics are kind of like guarded for folks, but if you feel like you want to talk about that, like, you know, go for it. I love it. Two, I think, you know, to create some transparency here, I also am a Christian, and I think that those sometimes the things that students choose to read, is it something I would read? Is it something I want to engage with? Maybe not, but I do think it allows a platform for me to not necessarily like push my views on students, but to say like, it gives you a point to really talk too deep with kids about things. So like if they read a book and they say, so, you know, my one guy that was written everything he could about NWA, you know that Suge Knight, so he was real hooked on Suge Knight, who was like this producer who was like a real devious character. And we kind of talked about how like, realize like, if you go down that route, like a lot of times there's no coming back from that. Or if you are that kind of, like if that's how you gain success is by like beating people up or bribing them or being a thug, that really is like, it's damaging to you as well as a human being. And I in no way want to try like to impart my beliefs on my students in terms of me saying what I believe and do this, right? I try and live that out instead of, I think there's a lot of, I think when students are reading things, it does create a lot of space for you to be able to talk about a lot of different, a lot deeper. And so I think that's part of the reason I'm not afraid of like what the students read so much, because it's like, that's what you're into? Well, that's interesting. Like, tell me why. I'm interested in like, you know, why you do that or why you're interested in that. And not shying away from those conversations. It's fun because I think kids don't ever expect that or see that coming. It's like, wait, you actually want to talk about, you know, whatever kind of weird thing I'm into? Yep, I absolutely do because I'm fascinated by you. Fatima Osman asked, when you all classes for teaching during undergrad, were those classes useful? And is there anything you learned from that transferred into the classroom? I think that's a great question. When you were going to school for education, did you feel like that was all useful information? And if not, like what came out of that maybe was useful to away with you?
Undergrad? She said undergrad? I mean, I was an English major in undergrad, and so I'm an English teacher. I have to be honest. Unfortunately, not for teaching. I mean, it was wonderful as far as the literature and learning and different things, but it wasn't. No. I mean, like the College of Ed was very useful, but just the undergrad classes, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. And so, but I also tell them to make sure that they're going for a reason, because of that very reason that you're going to be taking classes that really don't matter for even. Speaking of undergrad, that really don't pertain to what you're going to do. But no, Michigan State is an awesome school and I love it. But undergrad year wasn't very effective in regards to what I'm doing right now. And so even though I was an English major, and again, it was writing and reading different types of literature and different things like that. But the College of Ed had more to do with what I'm doing now, the department, than just my regular undergrad school year. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a no for me.
That's funny. I mean, I graduated with a degree in English first, and then I had to go back, and I felt like I was completely unprepared. I knew how to have a conversation, and I knew how to draw information out of what I was reading. And that, like, I became a more active reader instead of just reading stuff and then showing up to class saying, "Yeah, I read it. I don't know what I read, but I did it." And I think that was probably the biggest thing. And then, as not necessarily part of a class, I had a professor once tell me that when you start teaching or whatever job you get into, don't wait to start being the best. Like, you should go in and start trying to be great immediately. Don't like wait until you have tenured or wait until your job is kind of safe. Like, just hit the ground running, and that has always been something I benefited from. Do this one first before that one. Okay, so next question is, I'm going to say Budone is the name. It says, can you share a method for memorizing students' names? How long does it take you to match all names to students? You did this. You picked this question to make fun of me, didn't you? My wife is picking questions next week. She helps me with this stuff. But is there a way that you use to memorize students' names?
And that's the challenge I have because I don't have a seating chart. And so it's crazy that I'm dealing with that very issue. Now I have 151 students. And so what's happening is I'm learning names because you have your outspoken ones. Some students I try to remember, like one student has my cousin's name. So I'll remember him because it's my cousin. I try to do little things like that. But as far as just, an outright procedure, no, I just have to figure it out. When they start handing in work and different things, and because we have discussions a lot too, I learn it that way. And sometimes before they speak, I have them say their names just at the beginning of the year. So they say, and she give her response that way. But I don't have a regular because they don't have a seating chart, which is one of the biggest reasons why they have them, so you can remember names. But I just learn them as we go. So I'm learning names now. So I remember because you're outspoken. I remember sometimes by hairstyles. Some of them have unique names. I remember it that way. But now I remember turning work. And when I hand it back out, match it up. So I'm just learning by just going through the days and through the weeks. I don't have another way because I don't do the seating chart. And so that's how I pretty much pick. And it takes me a while. I still don't know all of my students. It's been 2 weeks. And so it'll probably be September along, somewhere along that lines when I learn all 151 by heart. So
yeah, I think, this one's funny for me because I think on the one hand, it's important to know every single kid's name, right? You don't want anyone to know or to figure out that like you haven't figured out their name, and when kids do have very unique names, the right pronunciation of things can really make someone either feel comfortable or feel slighted if I don't say it the correct way. So I'm very upfront with students on the front end. On that first day, right before I even read the roll, I say, I want you to know that I'm not trying to make fun of anyone. I'm very bad with names. And for that reason, for the last 12 years, I've been coming up with nicknames for students, which I've kind of always done in my life anyway. But it's something that's worked out to my benefit where, like last year, I had a student I had twins. I had 4 sets of twins last year, and it was maddening because they looked exactly, and we're a uniform school, so it's like you're killing me when you dress like this because everyone's dressed the same, everyone looks the same. So I started just like picking out something about someone. So one kid had red hair, and the other kid had like his more natural color hair. So just called him Red, right? And then the more ridiculous the nickname, the more they love it. And then I get kids that like, poor Tony, who has a totally regular name or rather a name that I'm more used to that I kind of grew up with. I could say your name, so you don't get a nickname, and Tony will come to me like at the end of the year, like, Mr. Reynolds, you call everyone else something like really, really cool, but I just get called Tony, and I'm like, oh, I didn't realize this is hurting people's feelings. Like, I'll come up with a nickname for you then. Yeah. And that's just my little benefited that. Because what I don't want to do is get to a point where we're like 2 weeks in and I can't even pronounce your name right, or keep forgetting how to do it, because that just makes me feel bad for the students. So I just cheat and I make up my own names for students, and that's how I get there. You want to do that one first? Okay, so I have two questions that kind of, and we're almost at an hour, so we'll finish up these last few, but I have two questions that kind of tie into one another. The one question on here was, I saw you talk to your students about racism and how do you approach it with them, and then the other question that kind of is close to that is, how do you deal with current issues respectfully in your classroom? So do you have the room in your school to be able to talk about these, like with anything that was happening in Charlottesville or anything that's happening in the last few years, especially in the news? Can you talk about that stuff in school? And if so, how do you approach that stuff?
Yeah, we talk about it, and we actually did a little bit on Charlottesville. It's continuing, but it's interesting because I have a very diverse group of students, Hispanic, African American, white. Is majority Hispanic and African American, and we have to read every year. We read Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail. So that's kind of how we're able to bring it up through content. And we spend like a month, almost a month and a half on it. And we start off by speeches and quotes. So we start off with, doing the historical figures. We talk about the quotes and the eventual discussion. It's been interesting because this generation, in my opinion, are a little bit desensitized or a little bit insensitive to some of the things that are happening. And this was an issue for me because it almost seems like they don't care about it. But it's not that they don't care; they don't necessarily understand. So what I do was figure out a way for them to see the significance. Now, I'm an African American teacher. Obviously, we see students come and say, "You're the first African American female teacher I've in my entire life," and so that's kind of one of the things that sort of open up the discussion about perceptions and biases and things of that nature. But we talk about racism, and I don't have very many white students in the classroom, but it's funny because sometimes I'm trying to figure out how they're taking, how they're perceiving. This year specifically, we have a very diverse group of students, and it's interesting because the students have no problems with, we're talking about racism. We talk about Charlottesville, and we have to say white versus black or what have you. The white students are just in there like, I disagree, or I've had a couple that have a different perspective, but the students don't have it's not a big, if they get into they don't get into an argument, but if they do, it's just a little bit more, believe it or not, they're more, how can I put it? They do better with this discussion than I think adults. And I'm saying that because not necessarily my generation, but the generation before me when this all started. I mean, this all started many years ago, but I'm saying I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. So he sees this issue differently than I do, and then they see it differently. So it's just a generational thing, but they deal with this better than some adults do. And so we talk about, it comes up all the time. We talked about Charlottesville. Of course, we talked about what happened. We talked about the man that drove the car into the crowd. And we talked about some of the victims, the people that were hurt. We saw the kid with the KKK outfit on. We talked about all of that, and all the students were very open and honest about, how they felt and what they believe. But again, because they haven't experienced it, they don't know what it's like to, not be able to sit in a certain way. And we asked them, how many of you guys actually had, experienced racism? Very few raised their hand. And I'm not sure if that's because arena's been interesting, but we always talk about those issues because we believe it's important, and it's something that they will have to understand, and in the future, they will have to look into in the future. And so we don't shy away from it. And it's funny, my co-teacher's a white male, and it's the funniest thing to see when we have a discussion and something is said. At me, it's he's saying we have a white male teacher here and we have this African American female teacher, and when differences are brought up, they're looking to see what our responses are going to be. So it's interesting because my co-teacher, he's on board a lot of things, and they're looking at him thinking that he's going to believe a certain way, so opposite. And so it's a lot happening. But we talk about racism. It comes up because it's just in the media, it's in the conversations, it's in our curriculum. And to my surprise, it's in the curriculum, and so and it stays. It's in the curriculum. The thing is that I have another teacher that's a 10th grade teacher. We read the MLK letter from Birmingham jail. Now, this is a white male teacher. He says he feels uncomfortable with talking about the issue only because he doesn't feel credible, if you understand what I mean. So everybody have different, just different reasons behind it. I don't shy away from whether I taught all blacks or whatever, all whites. It's something that I teach. I taught Black history. I do Black history projects and different things like that. And the students are very receptive. At first, I thought that was going to be an issue. Why are we learning about Black history? Why don't we learn about Hispanic? Why don't, it's just many things that come up. But the students have been very good with learning different things. And so it's great for us. We don't have an issue with talking about it. And students have never got into a major, controversy and debate or fuels about the issue, the topic. They're pretty when they're talking about it, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think those conversations are very interesting in my class, especially in the beginning of the year when the students don't know who I am. And I teach at a school we're about 99.9% African American students in my school. There's like one white kid, one Asian kid, and one Pakistani kid that we pull in for all the brochures so we can look eclectic. But like, if you walk in the doors, you see like it's inner city Philadelphia, and I really love that. Like it used to make me nervous. We used to read Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, which could be like kind of a weird book to read with students, especially with some of the language, and you have the slave owners and how they're like interacting with their slave, and the students would look at me like, is this like, are you cool with reading this? And I think, yes, because one, I don't shy away from any conversation ever that the students are interested in, largely. I mean, every once in a while someone wants to throw some kind of wild stuff out there, but largely it's like, nope, I'll talk about white privilege, I'll talk about, like, I get it. I get the fact that I am a white American who grew up in a middle-class household. My neighbor growing up, my best friend growing up, his dad had Confederate flags all over their house. They were like Civil War reenactment folks, right? And so I know where I grew up, but what I'm trying to do is never trying to impress my opinions or my thoughts on my students. I'll play like the role where like I want to kind of like agitate them sometimes to back, because I think that pushback in a safe space is really healthy, because it's going to help the kids explore deeper what they're thinking. But more than anything, I just want to air it out. I want kids to put it out there. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Because what ends up happening is there's a couple of different things that I push back at. One is the use of the word they, right? So this gets used all the time. So especially when we had all these young like kids essentially that were, especially after like the Trayvon Martin case, there was a lot of these situations where like the police were brutalizing or killing young black men, and so kids would come in and they're pissed and they're saying things like, well, they do this or they do that, and I would say, hold on a second, like, but let's unpack that. Like, let's see, like, what do we really mean? Like, let's not use the surface level vocabulary, but I want to go deeper with this. And then another thing that I'll get a lot of times is, Mr. Reynolds, you're the blackest white guy I've ever known. And I stop it, because I'm like, I see what we're doing, right? I see this as a compliment, but I don't want to be. I want to be, I just want to be a guy that you know, or a white guy that you know, because what that's going to do is it's going to, like, once you have a connection point with the person that you hate so much, or the race that you hate so much, like, it puts a stop to a lot of things, or it at least makes you rethink a lot of stuff. So I tell the guys that, like, my neighbor that was racist growing up, that had all the Confederate flags all over his yard, if he had one black friend, it would have changed everything. Changed so much. Maybe not everything, but he didn't. He lived in his little bubble and associated with only people that thought just like him. And so what I try and do is like, to that end, have a number of different speakers through the year come in and talk with my guys about all kinds of different stuff, so that they're getting not just someone that's like just looks and thinks the way that they do, kind of regurgitating the same old thing every time, but like, no, someone's going to push back, someone that's going to be brave, courageous, and challenge you on your ideas. And maybe you're right, but I want you to know you're right because you like tested that idea in the fire. You didn't just like hear your dad say it, uncle, or a song. Like, it's been tested, it's been proven, and I think that those conversations are the best. Anything that kind of we're talking about here are some of the best moments in teaching during the year, because it's real stuff the kids actually care about. And then when I can take that and turn it into, this is just Lord of the Flies, or this is just like the Odyssey, and bring it back to the lesson, it's like, I feel proud of myself for that, really. But that's that. Okay, do you have time for just one more? I know we're going a little bit long, but that was a really good question. Cassie is asking for our last one. If you have one piece of advice to your students, what would it be? What's your one piece of advice for your students? That's a lot, right?
Yeah, that's a lot. I would say do whatever they can. Well, no, I put it this way. Well, I would tell them do whatever they can to find out their life. And because this goes beyond English, goes beyond school, the school system. But I want them to see the value outside after school is over. Like, again, my mentor always talks about, I mean, from ages 5 through 18, you're in school. The most of your life is going to be spent as an adult, and so you kind of have to figure out what your purpose is. So I did a post yesterday. I had one of my former mentees, and I have several students come in and they talk about, going to this college or so forth. And I tell them that's pretty much what's most important to them at this point. I'm not necessarily concerned about getting an A+ in English class. I'm really concerned about them one day discovering who they really are, that person. And so that'll be and this is what we teach throughout. And this is why I don't just teach content, and I just don't teach English. I really want them to focus on understanding who they are and their value, and finding out really what they're supposed to do in life. I mean, teaching is my purpose. And I found that in early age. I knew I wanted to always be a teacher, and I took that away from me. And so while I passed some good teachers, and I had some school, but initially the goal is to find out really what you're supposed to do, and really school is supposed to help you do that. And so really that's the purpose of school, is to help you find out who you really are and find out your purpose. And so if I could just tell my students, do whatever you can, and follow instructions, get mentors, listen to the people who really love you, and to figure out really what it is you're supposed to be doing with your life after school and just here on out. So that'll be my biggest thing, is my students, I really do want them to find their purpose. And so yeah, so that's,
I think that's really important, and I would say to that end, I would tell students, work hard. Every single thing you do, you have to work hard at. So even if it's your passion, even if you're like a great singer, like no one ever became great by doing some work, right? Like, I mean, because I think sometimes students can get tricked into that in high school, where there's that, and we all have had this student that like didn't really do any work this year, but somehow they still got a good grade because they were able to just like, I don't know, they're like a sponge and they just like soak it up. But if you want to have a good marriage, work hard at it. If you want to be a great electrician, work hard on it. If you want to have six-pack abs, no one ever chilled and got six-pack abs like out of nowhere. You had to work for it. So if you want to have great children, you got to work hard for it. And so with all of that stuff, like, if you want to have a great life, you have to work hard for it. And that is something that, like, if my students can take that away, they can apply that to any facet of their life, and it will benefit them in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
So that's that, Miss Tanner. That was a really, really great conversation, and
Yeah.
I thought we got to talk about a lot of like important stuff that I hope is bringing value to people. Before we go, could you just tell folks like if they like what they heard here, like where to find you on social media so they could kind of follow along with your story?
Oh, you said my social media information? Is that
Yeah.
what you said? I'm sorry because it's kind of yes, I'm on Instagram. It's at Teach Miss Tanner, Teach MS Tanner. I put it in the I try to type
I'll,
it
I'll,
in.
link, I'll link it in the description box as well. I'll have a
Okay,
link
you put
to
it in
all your
there.
stuff.
And so yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter with the same Teach Miss Tanner. And then Facebook, I'm on there with my name, Darien Tanner. And so those are kind of the three platforms I'm on promoting teacherhood, the journey. And so
Great.
Instagram, as you know, I do a lot of things through there, working with teachers through Instagram. And so I'm there, Teach Miss Tanner.
Great. Well, thank you so, so much for being on. I really had a great time having a conversation with you, and I hope you have a really great for the rest of your week this week.
Huh?
I'm just saying thank you very much, in short.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All
Thank you
right.
I really appreciate you having me and allowing me to use your platform to get across some of my beliefs and principles. And so again, you're doing great things. And thank you again for
You
having
got it.
me.
You have a good evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Your platform
Oh,
to get across some of my
that
beliefs and
just happened.
principles.
Uh-oh. All right. Anyway, folks, on Thursday, I have from Instagram, the Unique Classroom is going to be on. You can check that out Thursday night at 8 p.m. And then kind of gearing into next month, once September hits, we're only going to be doing this on Tuesdays again. Because guess what? I got to teach again. I'm too tired to do this 2 days a week, even though it's pretty effortless. And I mean, I'm really just talking, but my kids got to get showers. Otherwise, they'll become stinky kids, and they won't do anything if I don't tell them to do it. So thanks so much for hanging out. If you have questions that go beyond this, you can check me out on leave your comments or questions on YouTube, and I'll answer everything that I can. Or you can just go watch Kate the Sleepy Teacher, who's probably going to go do a live feed right after this anyway for like 17 hours because she's like the Bruce Springsteen of you now. So guys, thanks so much for watching this. I really, really appreciate it, and I will talk to you on Thursday. Peace.